Why do so many men, surrounded by technology, social media, and opportunities, still feel lonelier than ever? It seems ironic, doesn't it? We live in a world where everything is connected, yet male loneliness has reached alarming levels, hidden behind fake smiles and exhausting routines. What few realize is that this is not just an individual problem, it's a silent epidemic that affects families, communities, and even entire generations. The idea that men don't cry and must always be strong has created a toxic cycle of isolation and disconnection. Meanwhile, the social pressure to achieve financial success, maintain perfect relationships, and appear in constant control is driving many to a breaking point. But what if I told you there's a way out? That there are simple yet profound ways to rebuild connections and break this cycle of loneliness. If you've ever felt disconnected, not knowing where to start to change that, this video might be the turning point. Let's explore together the causes of this epidemic, its impact on all of us, and most importantly, how to combat it. But before diving in, tell me, how are you feeling today? Leave your answer in the comments so we can start this conversation. The silence around male loneliness is deafening. While many men face a growing void, it's rare for them to talk about it. Society teaches boys to be strong, to never show weakness. But do you know what that creates? A cycle where vulnerability is mistaken for weakness. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase, but never asking for help. That's how loneliness creeps in, weighing more and more. Moreover, the pressure to handle everything also suffocates. Many men lose themselves between what they need to be and what they truly want. An executive might spend hours at the office, but upon arriving home, he feels the echo of devastating silence. The idea of a successful man is so tied to work that the emotional side becomes an afterthought. But let's be honest, when was the last time you saw a successful man genuinely happy? Behind smiles and jokes are men who never learn to express their feelings. They are in lonely marriages, shallow friendships, or even surrounded by people, yet feel lonely inside. Those looking from the outside would never imagine. Admitting it hurts isn't weakness. In fact, acknowledging it is an act of courage. It's like adjusting the sails in the middle of a storm, the first step to changing direction. And what about friendships? Many men, as they age, lose the connections that once kept them anchored. Without groups to support them or hobbies that unite them, loneliness finds room to grow. Something as simple as playing team sports or joining a club can be a game changer. Remember the old soccer games from your teenage years? It wasn't just about the game, it was about belonging. Loneliness also grows because society prioritizes results, not relationships. A man might be praised for earning a promotion, but who congratulates him for strengthening ties? It's as if emotional connections are secondary until the emptiness becomes impossible to ignore. We need to normalize caring for men's mental health just as we care for their physical health. After all, what's the point of strong muscles but a lonely heart? During today's video, besides the main topics, I'd like to share something that has made a difference for me. Recently, I started using CineBoost, which has been helping me improve focus, energy, and even reduce anxiety in my daily life. If you're interested in learning more, take a look at the pinned comment. And the best part is, you only pay for shipping. And do you know what's scarier? The impact of this loneliness doesn't stop with them. When men face silent crises, it reverberates to those around them. Families fall apart, communities weaken, and children grow up without understanding how to deal with their own emotions. Male loneliness isn't just about them, it's about all of us. But how do we solve it? Loneliness doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. Among men, it's often tied to the lack of groups or shared activities, while women tend to associate it with intimate connections like romantic relationships or deep friendships. Imagine a man losing the group he used to play basketball with, or a work friend circle that dissolves. He feels a void even while surrounded by others. It's like missing the team that used to give his days meaning. On the other hand, this difference in how loneliness is perceived explains why it isn't always easily recognized. For a man, losing group connections can be devastating, but he might never verbalize it. After all, what would he say? "I miss playing cards with the guys?" It sounds silly to many, but for him, it was a moment of belonging. Loneliness is often masked by pride or a fear of seeming weak. These varied definitions also change how society views male loneliness. When a man isolates himself or stops participating in activities, few see it as a silent cry for help. It's like someone trying to wave in a crowd, but lacking the courage to shout. If group connections are so vital to how men bond, creating new opportunities for interaction is crucial. For example, networking events, sports clubs, or even workshops can serve as safe zones. Now, let's think of more practical examples. If you know someone who seems to be isolating, how about inviting them to a simple project, like cooking together or watching a game? Small steps make a difference. It's like watering a plant. You can't expect it to bloom overnight, but constant care brings results. This attention can be the bridge to reignite that flame of connection. Technology also influences these definitions. While women often seek emotional validation online, many men use the internet for superficial contacts or virtual groups. But do these groups truly replace face-to-face encounters? Without physical proximity and shared energy, these digital interactions can deepen the sense of disconnection. After all, a WhatsApp group comment will never match the impact of a hug or an eye-to-eye conversation. Moreover, men facing loneliness often struggle to seek help because society expects them to be resilient. Imagine someone fighting an internal battle but lacking the words to describe it. This is where emotional education needs to come in. Teaching from an early age that it's okay to feel vulnerable can break the cycle before it solidifies. It's like learning to swim before facing the sea. To understand and combat male loneliness, we need to reevaluate these differences. What makes sense to one person may be irrelevant to another. The key is recognizing that connections, whether group or intimate, are a powerful antidote to isolation. Do you want to keep learning about this? Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss upcoming videos. Job insecurity is one of the biggest catalysts of male loneliness. For many men, work is not just a source of income, but a pillar of identity and self-esteem. Losing a job or facing career instability can be devastating, as it brings feelings of inadequacy. It's like having the rug pulled out from under you, leaving you without ground to stand on. In that void, loneliness finds room to grow, often accompanied by shame and silence. Imagine a father who gets laid off. He not only faces financial difficulties, but also an emotional whirlwind. How can he talk about it with friends when society expects him to fix it? The pressure to maintain composure and avoid seeming vulnerable makes many men isolate themselves, pulling away even from those who could help. The result? A self-imposed loneliness cycle. The connection between work and relationships is also strong. When professional insecurity arises, the impact extends to personal ties. Many men start avoiding interactions, feeling unfit to participate in conversations or events. For instance, a dinner with friends might seem impossible when their minds are consumed by overdue bills or the relentless search for new opportunities. Emotional isolation ends up being a natural consequence. And if we think of solutions, a practical approach could be developing new skills or creating a backup plan. Imagine learning a new competence that makes you more competitive in the job market, like digital marketing, programming, or even project management. This not only brings a sense of progress, but also rebuilds confidence. Online courses like those on Coursera or Udemy can be a great starting point. Additionally, creating support spaces where men can share their concerns without fear of judgment is crucial. Support groups for the unemployed or online forums can be an alternative for those uncomfortable with traditional therapy. It's not just about finding a job, but about regaining lost confidence in the process. This starts with small actions, like sending resumes daily or attending networking events. Another important aspect is separating the self from the job. A man is not his profession, although society often treats them as such. This separation can begin with activities that promote personal fulfillment outside the professional environment. For example, hobbies like painting, gardening, or even volunteering can revive a sense of purpose. It's a way to remember that there are many layers to who we are, and work is just one of them. But the loneliness that stems from unemployment or job insecurity isn't just about them. It affects relationships, communities, and even future generations. Hence, creating support networks and strengthening these connections isn't just an individual necessity, but a collective investment. In today's world, where technology takes the spotlight, is it helping or hindering this process? Technology, while connecting us, also distances us. Social networks and dating apps promise to bring people together, but often create silent competition and emotional disconnection. Imagine someone scrolling through a feed full of perfect photos and idealized lives. What should inspire ends up bringing feelings of inadequacy. It's like being at a crowded party, yet feeling invisible. Dating apps, for instance, make connections more accessible, but also more disposable. Many men report difficulty forming genuine bonds in an environment where looks and first impressions are everything. This reinforces the sense of isolation because, no matter how many conversations are started, few evolve into something meaningful. The end technology seems like a bridge that never quite completes itself. Furthermore, addiction to digital devices limits real interactions. How often have you seen people at a restaurant looking more at their phones than at the person in front of them? This disconnection especially affects men who already struggle to express their emotions. The screen becomes a shield, a place where it's easier to avoid emotional confrontations. But this comes at a high price. Loneliness only grows. So how can we use technology more healthily? One idea is to set specific times for online interactions and, outside those periods, prioritize face-to-face meetings. How about grabbing coffee with a friend or taking a walk outdoors? Small changes like keeping phones off the table during meals can also bring a more genuine sense of connection. After all, nothing replaces the impact of a face-to-face conversation. Another approach is to use technology as a tool to unite, not separate. Joining online communities with shared interests, like book forums or support groups, can be a starting point. But the ultimate goal should be bringing these connections into the real world. A virtual book club can turn into monthly meetups, or a digital friendship can be strengthened with a phone or video call. The challenge is that technology never rests, always pulling attention with notifications, messages, and endless feeds. It's necessary to set boundaries and, more importantly, remember that true connections don't need filters or algorithms. They rely on time, presence, and intention. Imagine turning a like into a real conversation. It seems simple but revolutionary in such digital times. And speaking of revolutions, the media also plays a role in this cycle. What we consume in movies, series, and online content shapes our perception of loneliness and connection. But are the narratives we watch helping or reinforcing even bigger problems? The media's influence on male loneliness is deeper than it seems. Movies and series often romanticize isolation, portraying lonely characters as mysterious, strong, and self-sufficient. The problem? Many men absorb this narrative as an ideal. Emotional independence is shown as a virtue, but what no one says is that this independence can be a disguise for the pain of disconnection. After all, who really wants to be the lone hero all the time? A classic example is protagonists who face everything alone, solving problems without help. This reinforces the idea that asking for support is a sign of weakness. Now imagine a man already dealing with loneliness. Watching these stories, he might feel he needs to hold firm instead of seeking help. It's like giving someone lost in a maze the wrong manual. They end up even more confused. Additionally, online validation has become a substitute for real connections. Many men post content solely to receive likes, comments, or views. But this rarely fills the emotional void. The media creates the illusion that being popular online equates to being connected. But let's be honest, how many of these virtual interactions truly bring comfort or help during tough times? Most are superficial and fleeting. On the other hand, the media can also be a tool for change. Imagine a movie or series showing men dealing with loneliness healthily, seeking help, or forming genuine bonds. This kind of narrative can inspire real actions, showing there's no shame in being vulnerable. Even documentaries or books about emotional health can open eyes to the importance of human connections. A practical example would be consuming content that promotes dialogue, such as relationship podcasts or films with more realistic stories. Another concerning aspect is the excess escapism promoted by the media. Lonely men often immerse themselves in hours of movies, games, or series to avoid real pain. While moments of distraction are normal, when this becomes the only outlet, the problem intensifies. It's like trying to patch a leak with tape. It might work short-term, but doesn't solve the problem. What can be done? Consciously choosing what to consume. Looking for content that promotes hope and connection rather than reinforcing disconnection. Participating in discussions about themes addressed in movies or series can be an entry point for new friendships. A simple, "Have you also watched that episode?" can turn into a deep conversation. Small steps lead to big changes. And, of course, the impact of male loneliness isn't limited to the men themselves. It reverberates to everyone around them, including partners, children, and friends. Isolation can influence family and social dynamics in ways that aren't always obvious. The question now is, how does this dynamic affect those around them? And what can we do to change it together? Male loneliness isn't an isolated problem. It creates ripples that affect families, communities, and even gender relations. When a man disconnects emotionally, this often impacts those around him, especially romantic partners. Imagine being in a relationship where one side never opens up, never shares what they feel. It's like trying to dance to a song when the other person is silent. Hard to find harmony. This emotional isolation also affects children. Boys grow up without clear models of how to express feelings healthily, perpetuating the cycle. Meanwhile, girls often learn to carry the household's emotional weight, developing a burden early on that shouldn't solely be theirs. This creates a dynamic where imbalances in relationships are reinforced, generation after generation. And when we look at the community as a whole, the impact is even greater. Emotionally disconnected men tend to participate less in social events, community projects, or even volunteer activities. This weakens collective ties and creates an environment where everyone is on their own. Imagine a neighborhood where everyone isolates themselves. No one knows their neighbors, and the sense of belonging disappears. A strong community needs genuine interactions, not closed doors. Gender dynamics also play an interesting role here. Women typically have more solid support networks, while men often rely exclusively on their partners for emotional support. But what happens when that partnership is no longer there? Divorces, separations, or even losses create a vacuum many men don't know how to fill. That's why fostering strong male friendships is so important. Interest groups like sports clubs or even book clubs can help fill that space. Another crucial point is the difference in how men and women deal with loneliness. While women generally turn to friends or family, many men tend to isolate even more. A practical example would be a man who, after losing a job, stops going out with friends, while a woman in the same situation might seek support from her social circle. It's this disconnection we need to challenge. And how do we start changing this? How about creating spaces where everyone, regardless of gender, feels safe to share? Mixed support groups, for example, can help create empathy and understanding between men and women. Moreover, promoting open conversations within families where each member is encouraged to share can make a huge difference. After all, change starts at home. But the most important thing is to understand that it's not just about men connecting with other men or women helping partners. It's about creating an environment where loneliness isn't a burden carried alone. And that brings us to the final question. How can we individually and collectively combat this epidemic of loneliness? Fighting male loneliness requires concrete and accessible actions, both individual and collective. The first step is strengthening existing relationships. Remember that old friend you haven't seen in years? A simple message saying, "Hey, I thought of you today," can rekindle an important connection. Loneliness often begins when we let ties weaken, but it's never too late to reinforce them. Seeking professional help can also be transformative. Therapy, still viewed with distrust by many men, is a powerful tool for understanding and overcoming the roots of loneliness. Imagine having a space where you can speak without fear of judgment, exploring thoughts and emotions with an experienced guide. Today, there are online options like BetterHelp and Talkspace that make the process more accessible and less intimidating. Another fundamental point is stepping out of your comfort zone and creating new connections. How about joining a club, gym, or local activity group? Attending a cooking class, for instance, can be fun and help you meet people with similar interests. Many cities offer meetups for varied hobbies, from photography to marathons. The secret is being open to exploring and experimenting. Establishing routines that favor mental and emotional health is also essential. Simple practices like regular physical exercise, meditation, or even a gratitude journal help reduce anxiety and increase well-being. An easy-to-implement example is setting aside 10 minutes daily to reflect on 3 good things that happened. This habit can change your perspective and gradually lighten the weight of loneliness. Reevaluating your relationship with technology is another important step. Disconnecting a bit from the digital world and focusing on real interactions can work wonders. How about creating a weekly offline day dedicated to activities away from screens? Whether it's a walk in the park, a family dinner, or even coffee with a friend, these experiences create lasting memories and help strengthen ties. Additionally, working on purpose-driven projects can bring a sense of belonging. Contributing to community causes or volunteering at local events offers a sense of accomplishment and helps expand your network of connections. Imagine being part of something bigger than yourself, knowing your actions positively impact other lives. It's a powerful antidote to emptiness. Finally, remember, small actions have a huge cumulative impact. Every effort to connect, improve, or participate is a step in the right direction. Loneliness is like a heavy cloud, but with patience and consistency, the sun can shine again. Now it's up to each of us to use these tools and create a future where no one has to face isolation alone. Now that you know how male loneliness affects so many lives, what will you do to change it? Small steps like sending a message to a friend or seeking support can transform isolation into connection. Remember, you don't have to carry this weight alone. If this content resonated with you, apply these ideas and come back to share your experience. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep learning. And don't miss the video on the screen now. It's exactly what you need to see next.